Alright guys, welcome back to this, the final video in the series for Outcome 2, the internal business environment. And this video, we're going to be talking about CSR, corporate social responsibility in our business planning. Here's a study design, and here we are, the very last key knowledge dot point. All it says is CSR responsibility considerations in business planning, no real detail there. So, CSR, we have mentioned this previously, and I've said before, this is the most commonly recurring theme throughout the entire course. So this is the idea that organizations, businesses consider the interests of society and the community by taking responsibility of their impact on the actions, or the impact of their actions on all stakeholders. Stakeholders meaning customers, employees, suppliers, shareholders, communities, and the environment. So really fundamentally what we're talking about here is businesses we know are all about making a profit, whatever type of business, that's fundamentally what you're trying to do. But if you're being socially responsible, you're not making a profit at the expense of creating any damage to these particular stakeholders. So ethical, social responsibility, you're going to get the idea of this because we talk about it so much. So some definitions, and it's worth getting a good definition of this one right from here because, like I said, the theme follows us through the whole course. So a really good definition is CSR refers to a business ability to go above and beyond legal obligations in relation to social, economic, and environmental consideration. That can include the welfare of society, contribution to local economy, or impact of operations on the environment. That would be a 2-mark definition. And the reason I'm using this one is because this question was asked to define CSR in the 2019 VCEE exam, and in the examiner's report, this was the example that they gave for a high scoring response to that 2-mark question. So VCEE had said this is a good example of response. Why not go with that one? That makes sense to me. Now, there's a couple of aspects in that definition. Let's come back to that. Go above and beyond all legal obligations. That's a fundamental part of being socially responsible. You're not being socially responsible if you're just meeting legal requirements. Okay, if you're meeting legal requirements, you're just meeting legal requirements. You're adhering to the law. Being socially responsible is about going above and beyond what you actually have to be doing or what you need to be doing. That's a really key thing. Whenever we're thinking about social responsibility moving forward, there's that angle you need to think about. It's doing more than you have to do. Now, where has all this come from? Okay, what the social responsibility? And again, why is this a common theme throughout the entire course? Because I think if you were studying business, or when I studied business at uni 30 years ago, for the first time, I don't really remember them talking very much about this at all. So this is a relatively new concept over the last couple of decades. Why is this such an important area for businesses to be thinking about these days? What's the benefits to a business of operating in a socially responsible manner? And what are some examples of social responsibility or socially responsible practices? In other words, how can businesses demonstrate CSR, which will help you understand this whole concept of being socially responsible? So first off, where has this come from? Okay, who is expecting businesses to operate in this way? Who is expecting this level of social responsibility, which, like I said, didn't used to exist, certainly to the level that it does these days? So first off, employees. Increasingly these days, employees are choosing to work for employers, that should say, so for businesses who have strong CSR policies in place. Okay. CSR also impacts positively on corporate culture, reduces staff turnover, and increases productivity. So in other words, people are happy working for a business that is ethical and is demonstrating social responsibility, because that is the nature of society. We're all moving towards becoming more ethical and more socially responsible, more sustainable. So if we're working for a business that is demonstrating those values and operating in that way, we're going to be happier in our work. Okay. Therefore, we're less likely to leave, which reduces staff turnover, and we're if we're happy in our work, we're more likely to be working well, doing a good job, working high quality, being more efficient, which increases our productivity. So definitely one of the areas that this pressure is coming from is the employees. Secondly, customers. Very simply, and this will make sense, customers are more likely to buy from a business that demonstrates social responsibility than from one that does not. So if you have the choice of two products, all other things being equal, if one is coming from a business which we know is being socially responsible and one doesn't, you're probably going to go for the socially responsible business. Thirdly, shareholders. Now, increasingly, shareholders, people that are investing in business, they're making their investment choices based on the level of social responsibility demonstrated by a business, also known as green investments. So there's an increasing number of investors out there that are not investing in necessarily businesses involved in producing a green product, but businesses that demonstrate social responsibility. And look, the reason they're doing that might be because they genuinely believe in social responsibility and sustainability and all of that stuff. It might be because they've recognized that this is the future of business, and businesses that don't demonstrate these values are probably less likely to prosper and survive in the long run, and therefore is possibly not a good investment choice. So they're putting their money where they think is going to get the best return in the long run. And they think a lot of that might be tied up in the fact that businesses are being sustainable, ethical, and socially responsible. Either way, shareholders are going to exert some pressure as well. Society at large, and this really links in with the customers, because obviously customers are part of society. Society at large, we're all now increasingly aware and concerned about social responsibility issues and sustainability. And we just now expect greater responsibility from businesses than we once did. The media, I think this ties in with a lot of this, and this is a big, one of the reasons why customers and society are so across this stuff is the media is much more prevalent. Social media now, bad news stories proliferate very, very quickly and become viral. So the media are really good at highlighting issues and focusing on companies that are not good corporate citizens, that are not demonstrating social responsibility, and can damage their reputation really, really quickly. Again, social media, it's instant. So the media love a bad story. You have to be really careful of a business now that, the media doesn't jump on something that you're doing that demonstrates that you're not acting in a socially responsible way, because that can very quickly damage your reputation. All right, now what are the benefits of acting in a socially responsible manner to a business? Okay, building goodwill in the community, enhanced reputation, attract and retain staff easier, attracting investors. All of that ties into what we were just talking about before, about where these pressures are coming from. Okay, they all link directly to those. And ultimately, through all of those things are going to lead to increased profitability, which is ultimately what we're here to do. So some examples of social responsibility practices. I think this just helps you understand this concept a bit more once you say, okay, now, I see that the business can do this now. I kind of get that. So once you see a range of these, which I'm going to talk about now, I think this will kind of help nail down this concept of social responsibility. So sustainable procurement of inputs, okay? So don't just look at the price quality combination of your supplies. Look at the supplier's social environmental credentials too, okay? So don't just go for the cheapest. Don't just go for the highest quality or lowest quality, whichever fits with whatever you're trying to do with your business, but take this a bit further and do some digging around into the CSR values and practices of your suppliers. Okay. And again, I'm just going to come back to this idea, what I said about the definition of CSR being going above and beyond legal requirements. Of course, legally, you don't have to do what I just said. Okay. But this is why it's socially responsible. If you do this extra digging and kind of take out of your list suppliers that are not ethical and are not socially responsible, even though they might provide you with the best supply for the price, if the deciding factor then becomes, yeah, but they're not a socially responsible business, then you're going above and beyond legal requirements and you're demonstrating social responsibility yourself. Choosing local suppliers, okay, reducing the carbon footprint. So there's two ways this works, choosing local suppliers. Reducing the carbon footprint, what I mean is in terms of getting the supplies to you. Obviously, if the supplies are traveling less distance, then less carbon footprint is being created by the delivery of those supplies. But also supporting the local economy is deemed to be socially responsible. Okay, supporting, and that could be on a kind of a localized level within, say, Melbourne or Victoria. It could be within Australia, but it's deemed to be socially responsible to be supporting the local economy as opposed to certain economies overseas, or if we're making this even a more localized thing, supporting the Victorian economy as opposed to maybe other states' economies, however you want to look at it. So a couple of angles, but again, not something you have to do, but if you make this choice, you're demonstrating social responsibility. Recycling, reusing waste. This is obviously a huge thing these days. We're all into recycling. So using recyclable materials wherever you can, recycling or reusing as much waste that you are producing in your production processes as possible. It's kind of a no-brainer. Going above and beyond with working conditions. So again, going beyond legal minimum requirements. We come back to this fundamental concept of what social responsibility is. Now, paying conditions. Now, when you setting up a business, there are awards. There's something like, I think, 122 awards that cover employees in Australia. Whatever your business is will be covered by one of them. So you could just pay to the award, which is essentially the minimum wage that you have to pay your employees in the industry that you are going to be operating in. And look, many businesses pay an award wage. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But if you're going to be socially responsible around how you're looking after your staff, maybe you go above and beyond and you put in place an agreement rather than just going with the award, which pays your employees maybe a bit more money, they get better conditions, and maybe even provide some additional benefits focused on employee well-being, which again, in recent years has become a huge thing in business. Well-being in the workplace, I guess, particularly since COVID, now is a huge thing. So are you going to go above and beyond? And it's going to cost you more money to do so, to put this stuff into place, but it's a socially responsible thing to do, perhaps. So are you going to kind of cop the cost to look after your people better than legally you have to? Using green energy, installing solar panels, for example. I mean, that would be the main source of green energy, I think, in Australia at the moment. We're still not big on wind and wave technology. But yeah, is it possible for you to install solar panels so you're using less energy from the grid, which obviously is coal or gas-fired or whatever it is? Again, that's kind of a no-brainer. We all understand green energy, I think. Look, producing safe products. I mean, this should kind of be a no-brainer, but there's lots of examples in history where this wasn't the case. Making sure whatever you produce is actually not harmful to customers. I mean, it sounds kind of obvious, but like I said, there's lots of examples. The example I've got here, the Ford Pinto, this was a car that was produced in, I think it was the 1970s, maybe the 60s, but I think the 70s. Look, Ford at that time were dominating the American car market hugely. And then what was happening at that time, the Japanese were coming up with cars which were kind of more technologically advanced, were cheaper. Basically, the Japanese had developed operation systems which were far more advanced than the Americans, and the American market was getting flooded with Japanese cars. Ford needed to respond fairly quickly, and one of the things they came up with this car, Ford Pinto, that they designed and developed it really quickly. It came to market much more quickly from design stage to into production and being sold to customers than cars usually are. Anyway, cutting a long story short, as it turns out, there was a problem with the placing of the gas tank, the petrol tank, which I think was somewhere in the back of the car. And it meant that if the car was rear-ended, the car was going to explode and probably kill the inhabitants. Now, Ford were aware that this was an issue with the design, but they needed to get it to market so quickly that they didn't want to redesign it. It was going to cost too much money. It was going to delay the car getting to market. So they just left the design as it was. So essentially, they sold a car that they knew had a fairly high chance of killing people. Now, the way they kind of justified this with themselves was that they recognized, or they made an estimate at how many people it was likely to kill over a period of time. And then, of course, the Americans love a lawsuit. So it was then a case of, well, each lawsuit that we get is going to cost us so much money. So basically what they did is they worked out that over the next so many years, we're going to end up paying lawsuits for dead people, so many millions of dollars. Now, that cost was lower than the cost would have been to redesign and retool and basically rebuild the car to put the gas tank in a safer place. So that's the choice they made. They put the car to market and sold this car, and yeah, people were killed. But for them, financially, it made sense. Now, was that socially responsible? I think it'd be hard to argue that it was. Fairly obvious example of putting profit in front of social responsibility. Now, would that happen today? Probably not. This, like I said, this was a different era in terms of social responsibility. That's just an example I'm giving you. It's a fairly extreme example, but it is an example to demonstrate what I mean. Creating non-offensive products, making sure that whatever you produce is not potentially offensive to parts of the community. And I'm using the example here. I'm actually not even sure if this brand existed in Australia. I think it might have done. It certainly existed in the UK when I grew up. So this was Robertson's jam. Jam as in what you spread on your toast in the morning. And their logo, when I was growing up in the 1970s, I think it's early 80s, was the gollywog, the image of a gollywog. So I don't know why that was their thing, but that was their logo. And nobody really ever thought anything of that. Okay, but on every jar, in all their advertising, you saw this image of a gollywog. Now, at some point, the image of a gollywog then became not ethical. People saw an issue with that particular imagery, and fairly quickly, Robertson's had to respond to that because now they could see that the product they were producing was potentially offensive. So they changed all of their branding and went to the one you see on the right there, which basically just shows strawberries. So it removed that image and they changed their branding moving forward to avoid the issue that you see there. Eighth, we talk about advertising a little bit with marketing, but just to throw in here, another example of CSR practices, be careful what claims you make with your advertising. Basically, don't be deceptive and don't be patently untrue with any claims you're making through your advertising. And I'm just throwing in some examples here. Oil of Olay. So Olay had these images of this lady you see, Twiggy, famous UK model. So they put these images of her, she uses Olay, that's why she looks so amazing. But then it turned out that the ads were retouched. So this was a deceptive advert. Okay, that's not really what she looks like. I mean, not going to be a surprise to any of you, I'm sure. But they got done for that. You have to. That was a misleading ad. This is an old one, but at Kellogg's making unproven claims. Okay, so saying 25% daily intake of antioxidants and nutrients, blah, 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 blah. And they claimed that it's going to improve a child's immunity. And there was no way that they could prove all of these claims. So again, misleading, patently untrue maybe, but certainly they couldn't back up their claims. Probably my favourite one, Red Bull some years ago, had to pay $15 million. I think there was a class action or something around this one because, this ad, I'm sure you've heard of this one, Red Bull gives you wings. And as it turns out, if you drink a can of Red Bull, you do not grow wings. Now, it's kind of funny. You would think that people would take that for what it is, not literally, but that there was a successful claim for false advertising, and it cost the business $15 million for that one. Last one, I think here, using packaging with minimal environmental impact is another way to demonstrate social responsibility. Look, pretty straightforward. When I was working at McDonald's in the mid-90s, this was what the packaging looked like. So it was this styrofoam stuff, which I think some local takeaways still use, like a styrofoam packaging when you buy the food from them. But yeah, so this is, all of the burgers and the sandwiches and whatnot came in this. And the reason for that was because it was low cost to produce, but also it retains the heat. So if you get a Big Mac in one of these things, 10, 15 minutes later, this stuff has good heat retention qualities. So it made sense from that point of view that you would sell food under this type of packaging. The problem was that it was really not environmentally friendly. You put that into landfill and it does not degrade. So in 1,000 years it will still be there, which is why at some point in the late 90s, McDonald's and a lot of other similar types of business moved to that like paper type cardboard packaging that we have now, which is completely useless for retaining heat or anything like that. Like within a couple of minutes, your Big Mac is cold, but at least it satisfies the social responsibility angle in that if that does end up going to landfill, over time it will degrade and it will kind of disappear. So that's why the packaging changed. And you can look, even straws, plastic straws to paper straws. Again, paper straws are hopeless, but they satisfy the social responsibility requirement. And another example that you use in packaging, over the last few years, supermarkets originally got rid of these single-use plastic bags. So Coles and Woolies both did that. And then they moved to those slightly thicker, more quality plastic bags. And even they didn't last long. After a year or two, they've now got rid of those. Now you go to Woolies, you just have those paper bags that you get. So again, things have changed really, really quickly there. And again, it's all about reducing the environmental impact of what the business is producing. So there we have it, guys. That is hopefully have an understanding of what social responsibility is and why it's important. Like first off, where the pressure is coming from for businesses to demonstrate this, the benefits to a business of actually operating in that way. And then, like I said, just some examples. And there are hundreds and hundreds more. And we will be looking at some examples as we move on through the Year 11 and Year 12 course as it relates to specific outcomes. But that was just to kind of set the scene and give you some examples so you have a bit more of an understanding of what we mean by social responsibility. That is it. And that is it for this whole outcome as well. See you back for the next video, which will be the first key knowledge dot point for outcome 3. For now, cheers for now.